From just outside the Beltway of Washington, D.C., where common sense is indeed not so common, and liberty and freedom are continually being sacrificed to the will of an ever-expanding governmental nightmare, we bring you a voice of sanity in an insane world with prolific author, philosopher, businessman, and political commentator Robert Ringer. Today's interview is one of a series called the Liberty Education Interview Series. Go to avoiceofsanity.com or robertringer.com and sign up for Robert's daily email newsletter and receive your free gift, Robert Ringer's 20 Life Guiding Principles, as a token of our appreciation.
Today's guest is Gerald Celente, founder of the Trends Research Institute. He's also the developer of Globalnomic Trend Forecaster, which he uses to identify, track forecasts, and manage trends. Gerald has appeared on numerous national television shows, including The Today Show, Good Morning America, Fox News, and the Oprah Winfrey Show, among others. Gerald, welcome to the Liberty Education Interview Series.
Well, thank you, Robert.
Well, I don't know where to start. One issue of trends gives you enough to talk about for a year, but let's just jump in. You call yourself a political atheist. What exactly do you mean by that?
Well, I don't believe in any political religion. You know, one of the mottos at the Trends Research Institute is think for yourself. We don't tell people what to think, and nobody tells us what to think. We look at the data, we analyze it, and we come out with conclusions. It's like going to a doctor and getting a diagnosis based on the information. And it's not important what the doctor is, whether he's right wing, left wing, conservative, liberal. It's just a diagnosis, and that's the way we look at issues and events. We try to do that without an ideology. We're only interested in the findings and not the belief system behind them.
Well, I think that's admirable if you can stick to it, because I think you'll agree that most economists, for example, do have an ideological bent, and I think it affects their thinking and their analysis a great deal. Don't you think the U.S. was already destined for bankruptcy even before the implementation of the new health care bill?
Oh, sure. I mean, it's been going on for decades. We've been writing about it in the Trends Journal, our newsletter. We wrote a story, Empire America Fading Fast, back in 2002. The policies really began under Nixon when he took the U.S. off the last part of the gold standard that was attached to the dollar, and it's been going downhill since. And then, of course, with Bill Clinton's program for the World Trade Organization and NAFTA, and then accelerated by a number of very, very costly wars, actually beginning with the Vietnam War. And that's why, of course, they took us off the gold standard to pay for that. And so the Treasury's been being drained for a long time, and put on top of that excessive government spending in every possible way imaginable, far greater than anyone actually could imagine. You know, I was just looking at Obama's recent summit conference on nuclear nuclear proliferation. And when you look at the stage that they built for this red carpet crowd to sit around, it had to cost a couple of $1 million.
Isn't it amazing?
Every time the secretaries of this or that, every time a president or prime minister comes, anytime they go anywhere, they strike up the band, they have a parade, they roll out the red carpet. It's first class supreme all the way. So whether it's bailing out the big guys, waging wars, or draining the Treasury at any different level, they're bankrupting the nation.
Yeah, and speaking of going off the gold standard, I believe as far back as the late 1970s that runaway inflation was a certainty, but I've always felt that the Ronald Reagan feel-good era and the high-tech revolution prolonged the inevitable for nearly 3 decades. So do you believe that runaway inflation is coming, and if so, when?
Well, you know, that's a good question, and I'm in agreement with you, by the way. It may not be an inflation. It may be a devaluation. So, for example, let's go back to 1933. people were cashing in their Federal Reserve notes, their gold notes rather, for real cash because there were runs on the bank. They didn't want that paper that it wasn't worth it printed on. And they closed the banks. They had a bank holiday. And what happened was when they reopened the banks, they made the people, of course, sell the gold at $20.67 an ounce. When they reopened the banks, they repegged it. Those days, of course, the dollar was pegged to gold. They repegged the price of gold to $35. So in other words, what do you lose, 75% of your money or thereabouts? And that's what we think they're going to do this time. We're looking for a terror strike in 2010. You can't keep fighting wars overseas and killing hundreds of thousands of people and not expect them to want to get even with you. So we're looking for terror 2010. In the event of that, in 2001 when we had 9/11, they closed Wall Street. You couldn't get your money out if you had it in certificates of deposit. I know because I tried. We think this time when there's a terror strike, considering the fragile condition of the American economy, this time they'll close the banks. And when they reopen, this time we believe they're going to devalue the dollar. So one way or another, whether it's hyperinflation or devaluation, the bottom line is that dollar's not going to be worth the digital paper it's not printed on.
I'm in total agreement. I've been writing about something that's not popular since the late 70s, and that's a deflationary depression. Don't you think that a deflationary depression would actually be a good thing for the country long term? No. In any way it happens, we'll lose. And it never shakes out where the people win. Some way they'll figure out how they could game the system so only the top of the elite group could walk off with most of the cash. You know, people ask me, what's wrong with America? What are the problems that exist? Where does it all stem from? I've narrowed it down to 6 simple words. Princeton, Harvard, Yale, bullets, bombs, and banks. There's nothing else to say. I think that sums it up perfectly. I like your emphasis on reality. I always tell people that I'm not trying to be optimistic or pessimistic, just realistic. Do you ever get frustrated by the fact that the majority of people don't want to know the truth?
Well, there's a great quote attributed to Jesus Christ. I can heal the sick, I can make the blind see and the lame walk. I can even raise the dead. But I, not even I, can save a fool from their foolishness. And that's the way I look at it. Yep. We do the best we can to put out the information. And again, our motto at the Trends Research Institute is think for yourself. We don't tell people what to think. But on the encouraging note, there are studies that show that about 20% won't follow orders if they believe the orders aren't correct. And we believe that 20% could be the 20% that leads this nation into a renaissance, to regain the greatness that we had before. It can be done. The wherewithal is perfectly in place. As you mentioned, during the Reagan and Clinton years, the Internet revolution salvaged the worst of what was coming because there was a productive capacity. Products were invented, designed, manufactured, serviced, and it really generated a whole new life. The same thing can happen with an alternative energy, but beyond wind, solar, geothermal, or biofuel. It could be cold fusion, zero-point energy, charged clusters, permanent magnets. We have the wherewithal for that to happen. We have the brain power, but they're robbing us of our brain power, our dignity, and our respect. They're shaking down the American people at every possible way they can. And this way that they keep us in servitude. So we have to keep paying them so they could get more and we could have less. Look, we did the Manhattan Project. They invented the atomic bomb. Even building Los Alamos, the whole thing, in terms of 2010 dollars, it cost $22 billion. I mean, what did we give that to Goldman Sachs last year?
You've said something I agree with totally, and I'm quoting, there is no recovery. The only real economic question facing the world is, will the economic bottom fall out all at once, or will it be a chain reaction, the guillotine or death by 1,000 cuts? Now, I agree with you that with the wild spending going on in Washington, a recovery is impossible. What do you say to people who believe that the government can always come up with more bailouts, more TARPs, more home buyer fixes, zero-interest loans, and other schemes to keep the false prosperity going?
Look, again, you know, we don't argue with people. You know, my line is, as a Bronx guy, you know, knock yourself out, believe what you want to believe, and we also make a very direct point of saying, why would you believe the people that got it wrong before? You're going to listen to Alan Greenspan, who admits that he was wrong 30% of the time?
Exactly. I'm
wrong once every now and then, and these little media clowns try to jump down my back and try to discredit us. If I had a track record as bad as them or Ben Bernanke, I mean, go back, look at the facts. Ben Bernanke came out in 2007, as we're going into the Great Recession in November, and he said there's no recession in sight.
Absolutely.
We were in recession in 2008 in January. He told Congress there's no recession ahead. Not only why would they believe these people, why would they believe any politician? You know, Ronald Reagan had one of the better quotes. He said, politics is the second oldest profession. You know, my line is, well, at least with the oldest profession, you ended up with a happy ending.
Why do you believe that the stock market has seemingly defied economic reality?
Oh, because there's no message, there's no myth to it. They've given Wall Street, the gangs, they've given them trillions of dollars, and at virtually no interest, and then they're reinvesting it in. So of course there's going to be a rebound. Of course there's going to look like a recovery. Look, I've said this many times before, and I'll keep saying it. I've heard enough mafia stories for the rest of my life. I'm Italian-American. I didn't know mafia people. But if the names on Wall Street were named Celente, Caruso, Mondavi, Puccini, Rossini, Bellini, Buitoni, they'd call it the mafia. And they'd have a field day. Every day we'd hear about how the mafia is raping the country. The ruthless mafia is destroying America. But you're not allowed to call the white shoe boys crooks and criminals. Oh, no. They're better than that. They're financial wizards. You know why they have to hire and spend so much money on this CEO pay and executive compensation to get the best and brightest minds on Wall Street? Because you have to pay the most amount of money to get the best criminal minds available. They're robbing this country blind. Wall Street's hijacked Washington. Follow the names. Henry Paulson, where was he from? Goldman Sachs. Robert Rubin, Goldman Sachs. Timothy Geithner, protege of Robert Rubin. Who's the head of the Commodity Future Trading Commission? Gary Gensler. Where's he from? Goldman Sachs. What am I, stupid? It's an affront to anyone's intelligence. Let's call a spade a spade. They're criminals. Wall Street's hijacked Washington. And putting the Federal Reserve in charge of watching the foxes robbing the foxes is like putting Meyer Lansky and Al Capone ahead of law enforcement.
Yeah, and I would throw everybody in the White House and Congress into that mafia group personally.
Oh yeah, look, you know why I'm a political atheist? The worst job I ever had in my life. Out of graduate school, I ran the mayoral campaign in Yonkers, New York, back in 1971. I was a young guy back then, and from there I went into. They had me running campaigns in Westchester County politics, and I was doing such a great job. They sent me up to Albany, and I was the assistant to the Secretary of the New York State Senate.